Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to officially welcome you to this 5th National BPD Awareness Conference and this glorious, glorious Adelaide morning. So to the locals, well done. To the guests, how lucky are we? My name is Dee Backman-Hoyle. I am your MC. I feel compelled to tell you that I have a bug and I don't normally sound nearly as sexy as this. So just letting you know that in advance. First thing I'd like to do, if I can, is to pay my respects on behalf of us to the Gama people, the traditional owners of this land on which we meet today. Pay our respects to elders past and present. The other thing I'd like to do, if I can please, is to remind us and remember those that we have lost through death because of their mental illness. We want to remember those. And we're going to start this conference by welcoming a very, very dear friend of not just borderline personality disorder, but for mental health advocates everywhere, and that's Senator Penny Wright. Now, many of you will be very familiar with Senator Penny Wright. She's a rock star here. So, ladies and gentlemen, if I could please, could you help me by welcoming Senator Penny Wright.
Well, thank you very much, Dee. And I don't know about a rock star. I feel more like at my age Blossom Dearie, if any of you remember that singer from the 1930s. But anyway, look, I am absolutely delighted to have been invited to open this amazing conference today. I too would like to start by acknowledging that we are meeting on the land of the Kaurna people. And I always say everywhere we work, we rest, we play, in Australia is Aboriginal land, and I'm very proud to be living on a continent that has the longest continuous human civilisation in the world. I'd also like to acknowledge my colleague Kelly Vincent, MLC, and Stephen Wade up the back. I think friends as well as colleagues. I should also just point out too that much as it's lovely to still be referred to as Senator Penny Wright, I'm actually former Senator Penny Wright now. I have stepped aside, and I'll talk about that a little bit more later perhaps, but it's very great. It's great to have you here, and I know that there will be I think there are other MPs who will be attending today as well. And I'd also like to give a shout out to my colleague Tammy Franks, my Greens colleague in the State Parliament, and I know that Tammy and Kelly have been doing really great work in South Australia in relation to borderline personality disorder, but I know that there's a growing passion and concern across the parties in South Australia in relation to this really important issue. Please forgive me, I haven't actually made a formal prepared speech for this morning. I decided I'd just speak from the heart, and I feel like in a forum like this, that's actually really the most appropriate way to go. Also, as I said, I'm retired now, and I'm actually enjoying getting some sleep. It's so wonderful. But I'm also involved in doing some other things, which is why I made my decision to step aside. I made that very difficult decision, but what's turned out to be absolutely a right decision, because I need to pay attention to there's some illness in my family, and it's been wonderful to be able to be back in South Australia and being able to pay attention and do what I need to do here without always feeling that I'm not doing either my job as a mum or my job as a senator well enough. So that's been good. So I thought I'd just briefly, in thinking about where we've come to today and just being blown away by the number of people here, knowing that the conference is overbooked, and remembering the other conference that I came to a few years ago when it was in this same venue in South Australia, and it certainly there was lots of passion and it was pretty full, but I don't recollect it being this full. I just thought I might reflect on my own borderline personality disorder journey, if you'd like to call it that, and about how my awareness of the issue grew. And I think it must have been about 2012 when I was visited and approached by some pretty feisty, pretty passionate, and as it turned out, very persistent advocates, and I'd like to give a particular shout out to Jan McMahon and Martha Kent. Martha, where are you? Sorry. Not here yet. Okay, I saw Martha last night. I've since then met with Jan and Martha and other people, of course, over the intervening periods at regular intervals, because that was one of the things. Jan's, if you haven't noticed, she's extremely well organised, and I imagine that she had some reminder in her diary or something. Haven't been to harass Senator Penny Wright for a while. Time to do it again. And so our first meeting, Jan, you talked to me about it. Certainly some of those meetings involved bringing some other people along too, and particularly compelling was meeting some carers and people with lived experience of borderline personality disorder, and very courageous opening up and intimate discussions about the nature of the condition and how it affects people's lives. And one of the things I'd like to convey to people here today, that to get change we need to grow concern in the community, obviously, and the way that we do that in a human society is by invoking empathy. And one of the best ways to do that is actually for human beings to hear other people's human stories. There's nothing beats it, really. And as a politician, I'm not an expert on many things, actually. I'm a dilettante. I like to dabble in lots of things, but I am an expert on being lobbied because I've been lobbied a lot. And so I know what works and I know what doesn't work. And one of the most effective things that works when you're actually wanting to spread a message and you're wanting to get change is to tell human stories and hook the hearts of the people that you're talking to. And Jan and Martha and the people that came with them at different times did that very effectively with me, so that the end result is that when they leave your office, as a person who's heard those stories, you can't not care anymore. You've heard enough that you actually, if you have a perception of yourself as a caring, decent human being, you can't then say, well, that's done and I'll get on to my next thing. You're actually compelled to do something to make things better. And that's the secret of good lobbying, and that's the secret of good campaigning. And certainly that's something that Jan and Martha and other people that I've met with, and Judy and Bob Burke, certainly. I met you at the first of these conferences that I went to, which was in Adelaide, and I've never forgotten meeting you and hearing the stories there. So that was how it all started. So I heard about this condition. I didn't know a lot about it at the time, so I did a bit of research and I decided, well, I'll make a speech in Parliament about it, and that meant that I then had to research. And there were two aspects to that. One was understanding much more about the condition and how debilitating it can be for people, and how prevalent it is in our community, even though not widely understood still, I think, and certainly the awareness wasn't there. It's still very prevalent, and it's prevalent in terms of mental ill health. And then, as well as that, the other great thing was my research showed me that there are real developments happening in treatment, that there is real hope, that there is real possibilities of making life better for people. And that's the other aspect of lobbying and campaigning. You need to tell the stories, you need to hook the hearts, and then you actually need to offer hope and solutions and make people feel empowered that if they actually then do something, they can create good change. And so that was where that journey started for me, and why I've essentially been led along that path since then. And so I would really like to, I suppose, looking at this here today, it reminds me of that idea of from little things, big things grow. And the only thing that ever changes anything is people getting together and deciding to make a difference and then working on it. So people have thanked me for my work in the Parliament. I've made speeches. I was very pleased that we were able to ultimately get a unanimous Senate resolution, which I think we're going to have up now, acknowledging borderline personality disorder awareness. It started with a day, I think, and then Awareness Week. And what was interesting is, there's awareness weeks for everything under the sun. There's international ones, there's national ones. And one of the fascinating things about that was we had to research how do these come about? How do these things happen? And there is no great, United Nations scribe that decides that you can have a day or a week. Essentially, it's by human beings getting together and declaring things and making them happen. But talking to Jan and Martha, I did understand that if we had the Senate, the agreement of the Senate, acknowledging that there was a group of people, a bunch of people, you essentially, that were saying this is going to be the week, if the Senate could acknowledge that, then that would actually give it a real boost along, and it becomes a thing. And so it did take a little bit of wrangling across the Senate, because it was certainly not a motion that I wanted to put up that was at all... Sometimes we deliberately in politics would like to have people voting against things so we can say, they voted against it. In this case, obviously, we wanted absolute unanimity about the importance of this declaration about the Awareness Week, and ultimately we were very pleased that we were able to achieve that. And I certainly worked with my Senate colleague, the Honourable Jan McLucas, who's the Shadow Minister for Health, in terms of getting the Labor Party across the line, and certainly then the Coalition also agreed to it as well, and the crossbenchers, so it became totally unanimous, which was fantastic. People have thanked me for that work. People have thanked me for the work that I've done in the Parliament, and that's nice. Thank you for that. I guess the way I see it is that's actually what I see the job of a true representative to be in the Parliament. It's an amazing, privileged position where you can actually use the power and the tools that you have at your disposal to amplify the concerns and the needs of people within your society, within your community. As the Australian Greens spokesperson for mental health, it was absolutely my community to be looking after, to be looking out for these people who are experiencing this condition. As well as that, I've got to say, the fact that Jan and Martha were from South Australia probably truly made me pay that little bit more attention, because we are also, somewhat parochial, I suppose, as human beings. And the fact that they could see me in my off periods when I wasn't in Canberra and come and knock on my door and make sure they were keeping me on task in South Australia was really helpful as well. But what I wanted to say was, in fact, one of the best aspects for me of being a senator was seeing the amazing civil society we have in Australia, and the amazing work and lives and the care and the courage that people throughout Australia do and exhibit every single day. And my work in mental health has shown me what amazing courage it actually takes sometimes to even get out of bed for people. For people who have lived experience of mental ill health, to just face the day again takes incredible courage. And my hat off to you. We all have ups and down days, but I haven't had days that I know that many people do experience on a really regular basis. I was also really, I suppose, inspired by the courage of carers. I've met carers across Australia who, through love and loyalty, again, get out of bed and keep doing what they need to do. And I also want to acknowledge, and I've been inspired by the clinicians that I have met in all areas of mental health across Australia, who it's often not a particularly glorified area to work in. It depends, but many of the clinicians don't do it for glory. They do it because they've got guts and because they've got compassion and care, and I really want to acknowledge that work. So really, for me, I want to thank you for inspiring me, because I've ended up going on an amazing journey that's enriched my life, and that's because I was inspired by the people that I met, and I could do my little bit in part of the puzzle to get change happening. And so that brings me back probably to something that might be useful to think about. And I've been a campaigner in relation to environmental issues, in relation to legal fairness and justice issues. I'm a lawyer by training all my life, since I was at uni, and I was first arrested when I was a law student when I went down to the Franklin. So I've been involved in campaigns. One great thing about that experience was I was lucky enough to be involved at a young age in a campaign that ended up being successful. We actually won that one. We actually saved the Franklin. And if any of you have ever been down to Strawn and seen the Franklin and Gordon rivers, you would, no one, I think, would ever go down there now and say, damn it, I wish they'd damned that river, And so I was lucky enough to be involved at an early age with a campaign that brought in thousands and thousands of people, all doing their bit at different levels, and all the different stages of that campaign, the ups and downs, until we finally got a High Court decision saying that the new government's legislation was valid and the river was going to be saved. So that was a long, long journey. And it taught me that by standing up for what you believe in and doing what you need to do and having persistence and passion and just keeping going, you can actually have wonderful outcomes. And that's what we're seeing from what is obviously an incredibly growing organisation and awareness within Australia in relation to borderline personality disorder. And so what is really useful is that all of you, whether you are people living with the experience of borderline personality disorder, whether you are carers living and looking after loved ones and friends and neighbours, whether you're clinicians working in helping train your colleagues and in creating awareness within the community, everybody has a role. Everybody has a role in that. And then the best campaigns are where people are able to get together and work out how their roles interact, and then support each other with a long-term view about where you're going to go, so you can actually have a strategy about that. Last night at dinner, it was wonderful to speak to people and just hear from people who are acknowledging how a well-placed word of encouragement, the power of human beings reaching out to each other, where I heard a few stories from different people about how someone providing that support for them at the time they needed it meant they didn't walk away. It wasn't too hard. And that was people who were organising sort of, I suppose, non-government organisations. I heard from Satya, the director of Spectrum in Victoria, about how by being able to get advice about the condition of borderline personality disorder with his, a very challenging patient in Australia many years ago, by getting that well-placed advice and getting the help and being able to help that person, that made the difference. I hope I'm not telling your story and you don't mind. Do you mind me telling the story? It was very inspiring. It was just amazing to hear how Satya was actually, as a young, his confidence had been affected by trying to work with this patient, and he was seriously considering whether he'd be able to stay in Australia. And in fact, by getting that help, he ended up staying, and look at what he's doing now. 19 years of Spectrum in Victoria, and Satya's there, the clinical director now. I found that very inspiring. And they're the sort of stories that I kept hearing that helped me do what I needed to do in the Parliament. So here we are now. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because I know the theme of the conference is New Directions, New Opportunities. Having stepped aside from my role as a senator, I feel like that's essentially what I'm facing. New directions, new opportunities. Through my experiences, I guess I've got even more empathy now. Because of the challenges that I've been facing. And so you don't know what life's going to throw at you in your lives, but I would just like to say what an absolute pleasure it is to be able to open the 5th Annual National Borderline Personality Disorder Awareness Conference, and wish you much luck and my best wishes for your considerations and your discussions today. And may you go away more united, stronger and clearer about how you're going to get from here to where we want to be, which is having services across Australia, having this condition recognised, and having all GPs and all clinicians know about the best practice way of treating this condition. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I think, Penny, you actually confirmed you are a rock star, arrested, doing those sorts of outrageous things. Thank you for that. Thank you, thank you.